Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is John Campea, and apparently I don't have my camera on. Give me a second to get my camera turned on there. Let's go over to Rob first. Rob, how you doing? Welcome to Moon Knight, everybody.
John, it's good to be here. It's my second time on the Moon Knight, what do we call this, review, spoiler?
Open spoiler discussion.
Open spoiler discussion. My second of 2 of 3. Very excited to talk about the show this episode, which, by the way, I'll just spoiler alert, I have a little mixed feelings about, but we'll talk about that. And still beautifully made show. Really enjoying. You know what? I'm just enjoying the depiction of Moon Knight. I love seeing Moon Knight got to wreck a little shop this week. We got to see some classic Moon Knight action. He used his crescent. Well, they're not really darts, but his crescent weapons. And he threw them and took dudes out. And I like that. Moon Knight killed a bunch of dudes.
He killed many dudes. Many dudes were killed. By the way, my camera's not. Hey, everybody. John Campea here. Here to talk about Moon Knight, Episode 3, open spoiler discussion, or as people have been reminding me, we really should be referring to these things as after shows, because that's
after shows.
That's really what they are. And,
yes.
and I acknowledge that. I've always kind of resisted using the term after show because so many other people use it.
Right.
But that is what it is. Like, I was talking to somebody, and they're saying, John, instead of calling it open spoiler discussion, why don't you just call it an after show? I'm like, but everybody calls them after shows. And he says, well, everybody calls movie reviews. I'm like, okay.
That's a pretty good point.
That's a good point. I concede that. So we'll probably, as we start covering more shows going forward, we'll probably start referring to these things as after shows. And that's probably what we'll do for now. But for now, I'm still calling it open spoiler discussion. And that's what we're here to do, to talk about Moon Knight, Episode 3. I'll tell you what, guys. You guys know I have been in love with this show. And I haven't been in love with a Marvel Disney Plus show since WandaVision. And how long ago was WandaVision?
January of 2021.
I mean, so like well over a year ago.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I mean, I liked Falcon Winter Soldier. I liked Loki. I didn't like Hawkeye so much. But to be in love with one of these shows again has felt really damn good. And I've enjoyed this so much. So here we go. We roll into Episode 3. Now, the episode starts off in a pretty satisfying way because we start off from the perspective of Layla, and I am assuming is her mother. I mean, they talk about her father in such a way that I assume that's his mother. Yeah, that's her mom, who is clearly part of the family business. I mean, forging documents.
I want to be like, I'm like, lady, I want to call her up and get, I want fake passports for half the countries of the world.
Let me ask you this, because you know the comic roots on Moon Knight far better than most people. Is Layla part of the comics and her parents,
well,
or is this kind of a new part of the story?
I think it's kind of a new part of the story. She can be an amalgamation of various characters. I'm not really sure, to be honest, because there's, I know certain runs of Moon Knight far better than others because I just wasn't that interested. Because Moon Knight, like the phases of the moon, John, it waxes and wanes for me. I began Moon Knight reading the Sienkiewicz Mensch run, which was much more along the lines of a Batman character. But as we saw in this episode in particular, they leaned in heavily to the other side of the Moon Knight mythos, which are pretty crazy and wacky. And I'm not as big a fan of them as I am on other areas of the Moon Knight. I mean, you can tell right now, John, well, we'll talk about it, but this leans pretty heavily into the gods and all the Egyptian gods and the war between the Egyptian gods and what are they all up to? A little wacky.
Well, okay. So, by the way, let me explain what's going to happen today. Rob and I are going to talk about this episode of Moon Knight here for a bit. And then we're going to go over and take your live comments and questions. For those of you guys watching live, you fired them in on Super Chat. And I say fired past tense because I've already had to turn off the Super Chat just as we were starting the show because it's already completely full. So if you got in your Super Chat before we turned it off, we will get around to reading those here in just a bit. I want to focus just on, instead of going through a chronological order of the show, I just kind of want to talk about in terms of things that I really liked and the things that I didn't like. Let me start with the things that I liked. I love the fact that we get more screen time for Layla because she is such an important part, obviously, to Mark, and a growing important part to Steven as well.
And I really like the actress playing her.
She's done great. I've never seen her or anything before, but she's done great. But I love that we started off with her We get into her home turf, going home to Egypt. So obviously some cool stuff there. We obviously heard we got some background there. I love that first part of the show, opening action sequence with Mark chasing those guys down, then fighting the 3 guys with the blades without the suit, just straight up fighting them and taking them out. I love that. And then I think my favorite part of this thing was in episode 1, I absolutely loved the whole thing when the fight happens and Steven is, when his life is in danger, he blacks out. And then when he wakes up, he's in some other ridiculous situation.
Yeah.
And then once his life's in danger again, he blacks out again. And I love, 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 love that they flipped the script on that and they did it in reverse, where Mark finds himself in situation and blacks out and then wakes up in another. And I love that they did the reverse of
I
it.
totally agree. I love that about the show. I mean, I have really loved, I think Oscar Isaac is doing exemplary work here, both as Mark and Steven. And we see a lot of, he does a lot of in one scene and one close-up that it was a moment where he goes from Mark to Steven and does that change. One camera shot, no edits, pure acting. I thought it was terrific. And I even love when he's in the trial sequence, which we couldn't talk about earlier this morning, how he was jumping in and out of being possessed and then back to his normal, well, quote unquote, normal self. The way he's able to make those changes, pretty phenomenal.
Dude, we were, obviously we couldn't talk about it on the John Campea Show this morning because it was spoilery, but there's that scene when they're out in the desert, him and Layla are out in the desert, and he realizes, okay, we need Steven. Fine. So he takes the mirror of the truck, looks into it, and then just the way Oscar Isaac does it, like very subtly, but he transforms into Steven, and all of a sudden he's Steven. Just the way he plays that.
That's what I was talking about. It's a single camera shot.
It's a single shot. I mean, that's Emmy worthy.
Yeah, it was really amazing. I mean, it's hard. Like, people think, oh, good actors can do that. But you're changing, even his face felt different.
Yes.
You know, his facial muscles were different as Steven as they are with Mark. And by the way, I have to say, I really enjoyed that whole sequence in the desert when they're trying to find, using a star map,
stars,
a
right.
literally star map. I loved him and Khonshu. I was there, you know, I will set back time. And I thought that there was actual
every night.
Yeah, there was mystical awe and wonder in that. Even though on one hand I was going, well, this is kind of far away from the Moon Knight that I'm interested in, but I really liked that whole sequence. It was beautiful. It was rather moving, and I thought it really had a sense of wonder to it. And I like that.
That leads me into another thing. Besides that, the action of it was great. And this is, I think you and I differ a little bit on this one. For me, an absolute strength of the episode was the extra involvement of Khonshu. I loved Khonshu in this thing. And I think for me, it's because, like, I'll let you elaborate on this a little bit more later, because I remember earlier this morning you mentioned, I kind of want this to stay a Moon Knight centered show. For me, and I think I mentioned this morning, I think you agreed a little bit, I love that we were getting more attention on Khonshu because you can't really understand Mark or Moon Knight without better understanding Khonshu and without better understanding the relationship between him and Khonshu, right? And so the fact that we got to get a little bit more into Khonshu in this, and by the way, I remember Chris mentioning today she didn't like the look of Khonshu in the daylight. I love the look of Khonshu in the daylight personally, but that's just me. But you know, the fact that we got to see him, hear from him more, understand him more, like we heard before that he was exiled from the gods, but we got to actually see some of the dynamic now between him and the other gods. I also love, because like up until this point, Khonshu's a dick. He's a good guy. I remember you and I were talking about this before, that he's a good guy. He's on the good guy's side. He's on the good guy's side. But you can be a character that's on the good guy's side and yet still be a massive douche. You can be a total dick, and that's kind of what Khonshu is. But I love the fact that understanding all that, when we get to the end of this episode, Khonshu does something completely selfless. He's like, all right, you guys need the star mat to find where that thing, we have to stop Ammit from being resurrected. Fine. I'll call up the star map, even though I know that means the other gods are going to have had enough and they're going to encase me in stone. They're going to trap me in stone. tell Mark to rescue me. Go. And he sacrifices himself in order to do it. And I love that. It doesn't stop him from being any less of a douchebag, because he's still like constantly dangling over Mark's head. I'm going to take Layla as my next Moon Knight. He's still a dick, but he is a dick yet a hero at the same time. And he's sacrificing himself to try to save the world. Even when he's like pleading with the other gods, it's like, right now, the world doesn't need observers. It needs the gods right now. And the gods are like, nah, whatever. So I loved that. But that'll lead me into one thing I didn't like about this episode. And I alluded to it a little bit earlier. And that was the trial. Don't get me wrong. I love the setup of the trial. I love the fact that when such what's it called, an enod? Is that what they called it? When an enod or something like that is called, these portals will appear to bring everybody inside the Pyramid of Giza. And all the various gods' avatars will come together to counsel. I love that. I love that. Then the gods can take over their avatars. The whole thing, the glowing eyes. Love that. I love seeing the dynamic play out to what is the dynamic between Khonshu and the other gods. Loved it. What I didn't love, and maybe this is the former law guy in me, but Khonshu summons Arthur. And what's his last name again? Harrow?
Yeah.
Yeah. They summon Arthur to come and stand trial. And he says, Arthur's been trying to raise Amit. And Arthur goes, no, I haven't. Oh, yes, you have. Why was he not saying, Harrow has taken the scarab of the blah, 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 blah. He has blah, blah, blah. Send your avatars. Observe.
And he's got the staff. He's got the power of Amit in his staff that he's walking
around with it. He's doing all that, like, lay out some foundational arguments. We want to hear from Mark Spector. All right, this guy tried to kill me because I tried to keep him from getting the scarab. But in combat, I dropped the scarab, he acquired it, and it brought him here to Egypt to go to Amit's tomb. And they didn't do any of that common sense thing. And I'm watching it going, why he's so dumb? Like, oh, he's trying to raise Amit. Really? Yeah. No, I'm not. Oh, well, I guess he's not. And like the gods themselves being so dumb, it's like, well, he hasn't committed any offense. What are you talking about? You just literally had one of your fellow gods and his avatar tell you that, yes, he is, even though they did no explaining as to why they know this. And that part to me was frustrating. That aside, I still loved the overall episode. The star charting at the end when he spins back the time of the constellations and the stars. I love that. The fact that he sacrifices himself for it. I love that. I love the fight scene that happens with the guy who's creating his own medieval times, the actor who had passed away. It was Egyptian medieval times. The actor who had passed away, sadly, before the show debuted. I loved all that. Overall, I loved the episode. Absolutely loved it. But that one part with the trial, even though there was some cool stuff in it for me, a little bit frustrating. What are a couple of things that you really liked about the episode and a couple of things you didn't like about the episode?
First of all, I love seeing the action. I love seeing the depiction of the character. And like you said, I am completely enamored of Oscar Isaac's portrayal of Mark and Steven. Layla, I like her character. I even love Ethan Hawke. He's a great villain. I love the way he's playing this. I've been really loving the series. This episode, I have to say, kind of lost me. And I'll tell you why. All of a sudden, we're not just dealing with Amit and Khonshu, we're dealing with all of the Egyptian gods. And apparently all of the Egyptian gods have avatars currently on Earth working to do their bidding or whatever. They're meeting in the Great Pyramid. I mean, to me, when I first started reading Moon Knight, he was very much a character of the real world. And the fact that he was resurrected, he was left for dead in a tomb by this mercenary that he worked for, Bushman, and Khonshu was there when he awoke, but Khonshu wasn't a creature, wasn't an entity, they're called something in the outside gods or something like this. That was not how Moon Knight started. Then the second Moon Knight series was Fist of Khonshu, and as Moon Knight has gone on throughout the Marvel universe over the last since 1975, all of this extra. I mean, dude, Khonshu took over New York at one point. They've traveled through time. They've gone back to ancient Egypt. The West Coast Avengers were stuck in time. There's the ancient Avengers or what. The Khonshu stuff is so convoluted and so crazy, and so it's so far away from how Moon Knight began. And they're leaning heavily into it. This episode leaned heavily into the Egyptian gods, and I'm like, I feel like I'm watching a different show all of a sudden. Like if you look at episode 1. Really interesting. He's working in a museum. I'm not saying that they haven't been leading up to this, but suddenly I had the feeling like, wow, I was watching the story of this man who's got a dissociative identity disorder, and now I'm in the middle of judgment of the Egyptian gods and Amet and Khonshu and the battle between them. I'm like, wait a minute, how does Moon Knight fit into all this? Where's bring back Oscar Isaac? And I felt, on one hand, I love seeing Moon Knight kick ass. I mean, he took out dudes with his crescent darts or boomerangs now, and it was awesome.
I love when he getting run through like 8 different ways.
Oh man, that was awesome.
Oh, by the way, I loved it too when Mr. Knight he gets run through and goes, "Okay, Mark, you take control."
Right? Yeah. No. All that stuff. I was really enjoying that. But then when it leaned heavily into gods of Egypt territory, I mean literal gods of Egypt territory, I felt like. I still maintain that a lot of all of this is in Mark Spector's mind.
I'm doubting that.
I know.
The further we get into the show.
I know. I thought that it was going to be. I really thought that was my theory was going to be proven. But as they've leaned so heavily into the Egyptian god angle that I'm like, where is this going? Because it seems to be more now about Khonshu's beef with the other elder gods than it is about Moon Knight himself.
I don't agree with that. I felt like that was a central part of this episode. But
right.
I don't feel like the tone or the focus of the show overall has shifted away. Episode 4 may change my mind about that. But
I just wonder, it just seemed to me that, well, Moon Knight, you've helped me out. Now let me consult with my gods, and I know he was there, but I feel like, I feel like on one hand, Ethan Hawke should be this deluded religious leader. And yes, he's got these powers and he thinks he's resurrecting Amet or whatever, but all of this is a bunch of BS, and I like, he's a cult leader, but is all this, I can't shake the fact that is all of this really happening? Or is all of this, because in the comics, they have done storylines like this where it is all in his mind. But then on the other hand, they've also done storylines that lean heavily into all of this mythology, and Khonshu has traveled millennia throughout history causing problems. So I can't decide, where are we at here?
There's one of the things that doesn't make me think, because I remember initially when you brought up the idea that a lot of this is in his head, I was partially on board with you on that. The further we get into the series,
I know, and
the more scenes that take place away from Mark and Steven. So, for example, scenes that happen with Arthur and his people where Mark and Steven aren't there, nobody else is there. Or when one of the other gods' avatar is saying to Arthur, "Hey, turns out you were right, blah, blah, blah." That's stuff that I don't know that Mark could imagine in his head. But again, going to the god stuff, to me, it's all about, is what's going on serving the story? If you needed to end this episode with Mark being separated from Khonshu, his power, all that kind of stuff, then a great narrative device for that is, okay, they lost the scarab, so they couldn't get to Amit's tomb first. They couldn't get his guys to talk. By the way, funniest line of the episode, I really thought he would talk. I love that line when the kid kills himself. When they exhausted all their options, and then Khonshu's like, all right, I'll summon the gods and I'll do that. And if you wanted this episode to end with Mark being separated from Khonshu, then a good narrative for that is Khonshu gets the Council of the Gods together. They've had enough of his shit. They encase him in stone. And now that leaves you narratively at the end of the episode where you wanted to be, where Mark is now separated and him and Layla got to carry it out on their own. I kind of liked it.
I mean, I just think that it in terms of the greater MCU, and look, again, it's not like this hasn't happened in the comics, that we haven't seen Khonshu do a lot of crazy stuff over the last 47 years. But in this show, it brings up so many questions as far as the larger MCU is concerned, that I'm just like, are they pushing it too far? Because I felt like Loki, the Time Variance Authority, went a little too far, and we'll see how they bring it all back. But again, I mean, it's not like I didn't like it. I just didn't like that it now expanded this storyline into this War of the Gods story, as opposed to being a story about Stephen Grant,
But how
Mark
could
Spector.
it not? With the avatar of Khonshu and a desperate race to prevent the resurrection of Amit. I mean, at some point,
Right,
you
but
kinda
now we have
to
all
get
the
other-
gods involved.
Well, I'm very in mind. I mean, we only heard like 2 of them speak.
Right.
And they were there for a couple of minutes and then they were gone.
If they're
I mean,
even
it wasn't
real.
that bad.
It
If,
could all,
if they're even real.
I mean, that's the thing. And I'm like, they probably are, only because this if you read, like I told people to go read the Wiki Marvelpedia or whatever it is section on the Khonshu of Universe 616, it's bonkers. You read it and you're like, wait, what? And it's crazy. You can read the Khonshu thing and it talks about all these different Moon Knights and avatars and all that. But, you know, I prefer the stripped down.
Sure.
The
But again,
demo version of Moon
to
Knight, I guess
me,
you'd call it.
I just kind of judge the show on its own merits,
Yeah.
separate from the thing.
But look, it's beautifully made. I love
it is
watching
beautifully
it.
made. I don't know this for sure. I'm guessing though that if they didn't introduce the other gods, as a viewer, I might be going, why the hell if the resurrection of Amit is so potentially apocalyptic, I might be asking myself, why the hell haven't they at least talked to the other gods about this? If something so big has happened. Now, I'm not 100% sure that I would be thinking that, but there's a part of that. By the way, let's talk about something we didn't even really bring up on the show this morning. You and I have been speculating for a couple of weeks, for different reasons, that there's another personality at play. Somebody asked that girl out.
Right.
Probably Mark seems pretty dedicated to Layla. Not sure it would be Mark. It clearly wasn't Steven. And this time, we had our most obvious evidence that there is another personality. When Mark wakes up and there are dead bodies and he didn't do it, he's like, Steven, what do you do? And Steven's like, I didn't do this. Someone did. Who's the third personality? What is our biggest possibilities here? Is it something that could tie into a comics? Do you think it's going to be something brand new that they introduce here? Because there's clearly a third person here now.
I think it's Ethan Hawke.
No.
Yeah.
Explain, please, why.
I think it's the Tyler Durden thing.
Oh.
You know, I think that Ethan
That's a
Hawke,
Fight Club reference for
because
everybody else, by
Ethan
the way.
Hawke says, yes, I was a former avatar of Khonshu's, but I broke free of him. Yeah, you broke free of him. You're the personality that broke free. Whereas everyone else, I mean, there's Mr. Knight can be summoned by Steven. Moon Knight can be summoned by Mark. And I've broken free. So I think that we're watching, and this whole judgment thing and all this business is it's the same person.
Now, let me ask you
Now,
this.
I
then.
don't know. I haven't worked all of this out in my head, but I do think that, and they're all working at cross purposes. And like when he says, like when Ethan Hawke walks, you know, it's like when they're sitting down talking in the cult thing. It's just Steven. You're going to find out that this whole thing, it's been Steven all the time.
So let
Or
me ask
Stephen
you
Mark or
this,
whatever.
because I personally find this theory of yours fascinating. Of course, if you think he was the personality that broke free, remember when he first meets Steven, he has no idea who he is. He had literally had to have him followed back to England to the museum and say, huh, turns out you really are a museum employee.
Well, that's how we've been shown it.
Okay. Now, a bunch of people in the live chat, including Manory and Louis and Quinston, are writing Jake Lockley. Now,
Okay.
I'm unfamiliar with the Jake Lockley character.
Okay, so in the original Moon Knight comics, there was Mark Spector. When he came to New York, he was a mercenary, defeated Bushman, thought he was resurrected. When he comes to New York, Mark Spector creates these personas. Stephen Grant was like a Bruce Wayne type playboy. So Mark Spector, then Stephen Grant was like an alter ego, rich. He had Frenchie, and we know that he's got a call from Frenchie. We haven't seen Frenchie. Jake Lockley was a new persona he had created, who's a cab driver. Jake Lockley drove a cab, and Jake Lockley would drive around New York, pick up fares, keep his nose to the grindstone to find out what kind of criminal goings on were happening. So Jake Lockley would do that for him. And so using the Jake Lockley disguise or Stephen Grant as a disguise, Mark was able to figure out who's doing bad things to whom. And he had his girlfriend, not his wife, but his girlfriend Marlene, and his former comrade at arms, sort of his own Alfred Frenchie. Duchamp was Frenchie's real last name. And we saw on the phone, was it the first episode or maybe the second episode, that he had got a phone call from Frenchie. But I don't think that Jake Lockley is the character, because, you know, in like the Brian Bendis run, Moon Knight thought he was Wolverine. Moon Knight thought he was Spider-Man. So I think they've created an original character for this show, and I do think it's Ethan Hawke.
All right, so we get through all that kind of stuff, and we end on this cliffhanger again, where he once again we have Khonshu sacrificing himself, taking action so Stephen and Layla can get to Amit's tomb to hopefully stop them from resurrecting Amit, understanding that this is going to mean the other gods are going to entomb him in stone. And that's ultimately what happens. I really do like that little conversation that Arthur had with Khonshu at the end. Like, Arthur goes back and has this conversation, and I thought it was a fascinating conversation because it wasn't what I was expecting. I was kind of expecting the traditional mustache twirling evil. I'm going to find your avatar, Khonshu, and I'm going to rip out his intestines.
Right.
And I'm going to... Rather, it was almost a conversation of gratitude. It's like, you know, you tormented me because he's a dick. So thank you. It's allowed me to be what I am. It was almost like he was taking no pleasure. Actually, there was even that shot when he realized that the gods were going to do that to him. Arthur goes, "You did this to yourself, Khonshu." Like, there's almost...
There's something weird going on
almost
there.
A sympathy.
Yeah.
There's almost a little sympathy. I am fascinated by this Arthur character. I am fascinated by it. So it's going to be really cool to see what they do with that. Where do you think we're heading now as we go into episode 4? Like, obviously, we're left with Mark and Layla. Mark doesn't have his power right now. This might be one of those situations where the superhero loses the totem, but finds out later on that the power was in him all along. Are we going to find out Mark doesn't actually need Khonshu there to summon the suit?
I've said there's a scene, I guess it's in the 4th episode, where he wakes up in an asylum, you know, and all of this. And I think that I keep waiting for the other shoe to fall, that he is in an asylum. Now, that's not to say a lot of what we're seeing is actually happening. It's just because there were runs of the comics where he thought he was in these fantasy mystical realms, and he really wasn't. It was just in his head. So, I think that the battle that's happening is in Mark's mind, that Khonshu's there. And maybe the other Egyptian gods are there, but they're fighting amongst themselves through Mark Spector as that conduit, as Stephen, as whomever, you know. Maybe it is Jake. I mean, dude, if next week's episode opened with Stephen Grant or of Oscar Isaac behind the wheel of a cab, driving the cab, I'd freak out.
I'm not going to be shocked at this point if that's what happens.
Right.
Like, I am seriously not going to be shocked. Man, and I cannot wait to meet Amit. I mean, we are clearly going to meet Amit. I mean, Amit can be around sometime. Khonshu will be broken out of his casement of stone. There's going to be some big epic battle that involves the avatars and all this kind of stuff. Also, I love the fact that Khonshu needed Stephen's help to do his whole star constellation time warp thing, which is one of the things that suggests to me that in episode 4, we may discover that Stephen and Mark may be able to summon the suit on their own, because clearly part of the power is in them at this point.
Yes.
Just as Arthur, he doesn't have Amit there, but part of Amit's power is in him through his staff.
Right.
I think we're going to find out part of Khonshu's power is actually within Mark and Stephen.
Or, because as I said, one of the Moon Knight comics was called Fist of Khonshu. And, you see the scale, or vengeance, or justice, or whatever. And you see that Ethan Hawke's character has those scales of justice on his forearm. That just to me strengthens the idea that this is we're watching all one character.
All right. Well, guys, that's our thoughts on Moon Knight episode 3. Let's now take the rest of our time here going over to you guys and hearing your opinions, thoughts, theories, observations, and questions about it, shall we? Let's jump on over there right now and see what you guys have to say. We're going to get things started off here with Ismael Montoya, who writes in, hey, John, this show keeps growing on me, but oh my God, the on-camera changes in character of Oscar Isaac felt like a masterclass.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss. You know, Rob and I have both been talking about that. It's like Oscar Isaac playing these two various characters, but it's everything, even from the way he uses his eye muscles when he smiles or doesn't smile. It's completely different the way it happens between the Mark persona and the Steven persona. It's an absolute incredible thing we're watching Oscar Isaac do in front of our eyes here, Ismail. Josh Kahn writes, I felt this episode was a huge step down plot-wise from the first two episodes. Trial scene had way too many plot holes. While I enjoyed the visuals, the sky/space shifting scene would get everyone in the MCU's attention immediately, especially sorcerers, Avengers, or cosmic individuals. I am nervous now. Here's the thing. First of all, about the plot holes in the trial scene, I agree. Plot-wise, I think this might be the best episode yet, the way it pushed the plot forward, personally. But yeah, I had problems with the trial scene myself as well. This, Rob, comes back to a problem that I've been talking about ever since the movie blog days, when the shared cinematic universe starts going on. You now can't have a movie in the, pick one, the DCEU. Why didn't Superman come and help? Because it's not a Superman movie. Well, when the ocean started to attack in Aquaman, why didn't that? Because it's not their movie. It's Aquaman. What do you want me to tell you? Everybody expects everybody to come and show up. And yes, you have, and this is what I'm always talking about when I talk about how the great thing about separate universe movies like Robert Pattinson's Batman is that the filmmakers or storytellers don't have handcuffs on about what they can and can't do because they have to be so concerned about, is it consistent with what's going on in our shared cinematic universe? Take off the handcuffs, let them tell whatever story they want to tell. Because because he's not wrong. Josh is not wrong when he points out, hey man, if the entire night sky all of a sudden went crazy like that, that would get the attention of some of the heroes in the MCU. And maybe we'll find out later it does. But I like giving the storytellers the freedom to do shit like this and not have to worry about the rest of the cinematic universe. But he's not wrong. Other people would have noticed. The gods certainly noticed. What do you think about that?
Well, look, I don't actually think that Khonshu has the power to change heaven and earth. I mean, if you think about how vast the universe is and the fact that the starlight,
is the god of the moon.
Yes, but beyond the moon, you're talking about starlight that's light years away from us. I think what he was doing was he was taking a representation of the night sky and his power, and swirling it
But
back.
it was visible to everybody what was happening, right?
Well, was it though? It could have just been visible to where they're standing.
Yeah, you could be right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it as almost like a magic spell that he was casting. Like where you're standing, what you're looking at from your perspective and the stars, it's only from where you're standing on the earth. I mean, even if you stepped 10 feet away, it would be a little bit different, And so that's kind of the way I saw it, that he was in a bubble. They were all kind of in their own.
The people in the city saw, because we saw scenes of everybody in the city.
Yeah.
But it might have been limited to just in an
area.
20 square miles.
Something like that. So, and people are looking at that, okay. But which I really, really liked. And that's another thing. I mean, we're dealing with these weird cosmologies. I had a point. What was your original question about this? I was talking.
What do you think about the notion that, the rest of the people, the rest of the world?
Well, I that's why in this case I don't think that's the case. But on another case, like, how do you know that when the big battle between the Seven Kingdoms and Aquaman, maybe Superman was off world? Or maybe Superman knows, like, I don't get involved with the affairs of terrestrial beings. It's not my place to come stop the Atlanteans from attacking. I can't do it. Who knows? I mean, John, how many people do you know, like, if your family, God forbid, was in trouble in Hamilton, what are you going to do? You have to get on a plane. You got to fly there. You have to land. I mean, what if something was going on with your family that lasted an hour? You wouldn't be able to get there in time. So how can everybody expect every superhero they're doing their own thing? When Batman's dealing with Gotham, what's somebody else doing in Star City? It's wacky that we expect all of these heroes to call each other up on the phone and, I heard my emergency beacon. Here I am, here to help. What's going on with Moon Knight and Mark Spector and Layla in the desert? Nobody knows they're there except the three of them.
Yeah.
You know, and if something crazy is going on over the night sky of Egypt, it would take how long before it was on the nightly news? 30 minutes, an hour? Hey, something crazy is going on in the sky above, you know? It lasted for 5 minutes and then went away.
All right. Next up, we got Sam Fisher writes, loved the name drop of the Overvoid. I didn't recognize that.
That's where these characters, that's what it's called, the Overvoid.
I love the name drop of the Overvoid right out of the Jeff Lemire and Greg Smallwood runs of the book.
Yep.
The whole episode looked like that run. So explain that to people.
Well, that's the Jeff. Okay, that's where these gods exist, is in the Overvoid. That's where they are. That's where they reside. And yes, they're leaning heavily into that Jeff Lemire run. And it does, as he pointed out, it does look like, I mean, I think Stephen Platt was the name of the artist who drew that run. I think, I'm not sure, but it's very similar to all of that. But that's where the Overvoid. That's where these gods are.
All right, thanks for pointing that one out, man. All right, next one. We've got that was Sam. Okay, next up, we've got New Day writes. Like Robert, I'm a little on the fence about whether this is only happening in Mark's mind. You expect the transformation to Moon Knight to be fantastical, but many details that should be grounded in reality don't add up. He picks up with, for instance, at Senfu's sarcophagus, when looking for the constellation mat, Mark is handling a 2,000-year-old parchment with his bare hands. The parchment should fall apart with this kind of handling. Mundane details don't feel real at times. By the way, New Day sent in $70 of super chats to send in that particular observation about. So thank you so much, New Day. I love that you
agree with me, which is always good.
And you agree with Rob, which is always good. First of all, the parchment. I got the impression when I was looking at it that it was more like a cloth. I mean, I didn't feel like it was paper parchment. It could, like you saw the way it was folded, and it was clearly worn, but then the worn was strategic to represent constellations.
But then when it actually looked like a star, you know, which
the way they put it together.
And I'm like, that's kind of goofy. Like, is that how they would do it? The way we draw stars today, if it was this ancient thing, would they make a star look just? I guess they might, because like a Star of David or whatever. But yeah, but it still was like, okay.
But New Day, I should say. New Day brings up the fact that he's kind of getting into your theory about a lot of what's happening in Mark's head. Okay, let me pursue that for a second. What does that ultimately look like? Because to me, right now, they've done a lot of storytelling. We've seen a lot of stuff happen. To go 3 full episodes, halfway through the show, we're now, wrap your heads around that, guys. This 6-episode season stuff is bullshit, but we are now 3 episodes
We're on the down slope of the series.
Yeah, we're already on the other side of the series. 3 episodes in, halfway through the episode. What does it look like narratively? Let me ask you this. If it is indeed that a lot of this is in Mark's head or Steven's head, what does that look like in the show? How do you explain that to the audience? What was real in what we saw and what wasn't? What do we do as an audience with all the stakes that we felt and the danger that was happening, finding out none of that was real anyway? What's their way forward? If this is in some of their heads, what's their way forward here narratively?
Oh, I think something's actually happening. It's just the way it's been contextualized in Mark's mind is different than what's actually happening. Like the pantheon of Egyptian gods, it might be just a group, you know, of mercenary dudes. Like I don't know, that in his mind, he's given it this sheen because it's him. The way the character was originally conceived, or the way Doug mentioned and Bill Sienkiewicz drew him, is he believed that it was Khonshu that revived him. Even as the Batman-esque Moon Knight that I was reading in the first volume of the comics, there was no Khonshu. That all that stuff came later, and it was real. But what if in this version he does believe in all this stuff because he is an Egyptologist, or he knows his archaeology, but his fractured mind has made all of this stuff, all this extra stuff with the gods and Khonshu and all that. That's how he's coping with whatever he's dealing with. And when he wakes up or something, or when he's in the institution, we're going to find out that things have been happening that are variations on this theme, but the way his mind has contextualized it, it's different. So that's why I'm like, he's not even in ancient Egypt.
Right.
He might as well still be in England. You know, this is all in his mind. But what's happening is actually happening. if that makes any sense.
Whoo, deep. All right. So I put up a poll while we were discussing this, and I asked the audience, I simply asked them, is what we've seen in Mortal Kombat, in Moon, whenever I see MK, I want to say Mortal Kombat, is what we've seen in Moon Knight real or just in Mark's head? About 200 people have voted already. 76% say it's real. 24% say not real. So almost a quarter of the people think that, yeah, maybe this could be, we're going to find out at least some of this is somewhat just in his head.
Right. And I only go by that because they've done that stuff like that in the comics.
All right. Thanks a lot for saying that in New Day. And thank you so much for supporting our channel on that level. Really appreciate that, man. Very much. All right. Let's keep going on here. Next up, we've got Sam Fisher. And Sam Fisher writes, love seeing the personality take over from Mark's perspective. Not as jarring, but really cool. Again, it's one of my favorite parts of this episode because it's taken one of my favorite things in the show so far, the sudden blackout takeovers and then waking up in some other weird situation. But they did it the opposite way this time with Mark instead of with Steven. I absolutely love that, Sam. That was one of my favorite parts. Elif Bayrazli writes, I'm enjoying this series so far, but I didn't love this episode. It did have some good moments, though. Yeah, again, like, you weren't completely thrilled with this episode. I was. It wasn't my favorite episode of the season so far. I did have a problem with that whole trial sequence.
Yeah.
But the way it moved the narrative, our deepening understanding about Mark and his connection to Khonshu, who Khonshu is, Khonshu's connection to the god, by extension, Mark's connection to the gods, and the role he plays in all this, and where we ended up with, I worked for me, but didn't work for everybody, Elif. But hey, I'm glad you at least had some things in this episode that you enjoyed. Ishmael Montoya writes, man, all the civilians of the MCU must be going crazy with all the crap that happens in the sky lately. First, Arasham shows up. Doctor Strange cracks the sky. Now Khonshu twists the sky. Oh, and let's not even go into the alien invasion of New York, right, or Sokovia having chunks of the country almost turn into a planet-killing asteroid, or you name your calamity. I mean, yes, to be a person that lives in the MCU is deadly.
And I think they need to deal with this at some point. They need to deal there's a great comic series that Alex Ross painted called Marvels. That's from the point of view of the man on the street. I really think that Marvel needs to come up. They need to do a Marvels. Well, they're not going to because that would be the Miss Marvel series. But they need to do and address this because maybe through a sword series. Like how does the world deal with all this stuff? Yeah. Like when and this is of course, John, after having been snapped by Thanos.
That's right.
So. I mean, I think the people of the Earth...
The entire planet would be living in an existential crisis.
Absolutely. That's what I mean. I mean, what do the religions of the world say when someone like Thanos can snap you into non-existence and bring you back 5 years later?
Or then Arsham appears in the planet's orbit.
Or a celestial comes out of the ocean. You know, what are they doing? Booking tour guides? Look, it's a giant celestial that turns to stone.
Then
we don't know
rip
how.
Our planet in half. Yeah. It's not fun to be a civilian in the MCU. All right, next up. We've got Sam Fisher who writes, this episode all but confirmed that there is at least one more personality. Completely agree. It absolutely did. And that's one of the hanging mysteries that we have. I think that mystery is going to be solved in episode 4. And then 5 and 6 is anybody's guess because nobody has seen 5 and 6.
I know.
And that's where things can get really crazy. Orange Hand writes, we thought Mark was responsible for the violence during Steven's loss of control, but I think it was actually the third personality. I don't think so. I absolutely do think it was Mark because even in that first episode, Mark then appears to Steven to say, I can save us, relinquish control to me. Khonshu makes no mention of a third personality. He refers to the individual as Mark and the other as the worm or the parasite, but he only refers to them singly. I'm wondering if even Khonshu knows about the third personality. So while this absolutely confirms there is a third personality, I don't think we saw that third personality in the first episode. I think that was Mark, although whoever asked the girl out was probably the third personality. We'll see for sure. All right, next up, Sam Fisher writes, I love seeing Khonshu in complete daylight. His design is cool. Dude, I loved the Khonshu in broad daylight look. I mean, it just looks so, what's the word I'm looking for? Real.
Well, yeah,
it just does. It's so real to me.
And I love the whatever the tendrils are between the head and the body that are barely there. The pigeon skull. Yeah,
Is that what he called him at some point? You freaking pigeon or
Yeah,
whatever?
something like that.
Oh, God, I love that. I thought that was great. All right, next up. Empire Fan 1980 writes, I saw something that I thought was interesting in Winter Soldier. They mentioned a TV anchor from Cairo, and in Civil War, again, they mentioned Cairo. I don't think that means anything. Cairo, I mean, New York gets mentioned a bunch of times.
Yeah.
I
don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a strenuous connection at best. Listen, I guarantee you that when they made Winter Soldier, Moon Knight wasn't even a fleeting thought in
No.
Kevin Feige's mind. I don't think, I mean, but, hey, Empire, keep it in mind. Because if we do find out at some point, they can always backtrack
we'll revisit that.
They can always backtrack it if they want. Let's keep an eye on that. All right, James Argento writes, fans beware the website Fiction Horizon. I assume accidentally posted their episode 4 review a week early for Moon Knight with pics from the episode. Oh, that sucks. Well, hopefully they pull that down by now, James.
What's it called?
Yeah, never mind. Sam Fisher writes, I love the Enid. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah,
the Enid, whatever, council scene, maybe my favorite scene so far. See, that's the thing, Sam. There were parts about it that I loved. It's just the trial itself, that made no sense. He did this. Okay,
Right.
make an argument.
Yeah.
No, it just he did it. And all the other guys says, no, I didn't. Oh, well, you heard him. He didn't do anything, ladies and gentlemen. Case dismissed. It made no sense to me. So
I don't think it's supposed to. I think it's nightmare logic.
Nightmare logic. All right.
On.
Well, Sam Fisher also writes, I love seeing Oscar Isaac go from Mark to Steven. We've spoken about that. Brilliantly acted. And I love seeing how differently Steven looks at Layla versus how Mark looks at her. Yeah, I mean, clearly Mark is in love with her. He is willing. Keep this in mind. Mark is willing to continue to live this hellish existence in servitude to Khonshu, the dick, all to protect Layla.
Right.
He's even willing to give up the love of his life and stay away from the love of his life to protect her. He's willing to do anything for her.
Yeah.
Steven, at the same point, he looks so longingly. Virgin Steven. Wait a second. Hey, Google. How old is Oscar Isaac? I'm going to find this out. Oh, it didn't hear me. Hey, Google. How old is Oscar Isaac? I want to find out how old he is.
Something went wrong.
Oh,
Try again in a few
he
seconds.
doesn't know. So hold on, let me get Oscar Isaac age. So Steven is the 43-year-old virgin. Okay? He's a virgin. Of course he's going to look longingly at any girl that will pay attention to him and talk to him. But still, clearly, he's crazy about her. And as they start to unravel the mystery of the star chart, you could tell she's digging on him. So you could have a love triangle. How do you have a love triangle with two people? Well, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
Love triangle with two people. It's going to be interesting to see where they go with that. All right. Next up, we've got Sam Fisher also again writes in, during that opening knife fight, was anyone else thinking Raiders and Mark was just going to shoot the two other ones and leave the youngest alive? I do like that.
That's funny. I didn't think that, but that's funny.
Neither did I, but that's hilarious.
Yeah.
And I also thought, I like the fact that Mark said to Khonshu, what did Khonshu say to do to him? Then he said, take him to the cliff. And Mark says, he's just a kid. Like even Mark has lines, right?
Yeah.
But it'll make him talk. All right. Long live Ahmet.
But yeah, and that was the kid sacrificed himself.
Yeah,
so.
the kid died for what he believed in. Good on him, I suppose. But again, leading to one of the best lines ever in the MCU TV series. I really thought he'd talk. I love that line.
That's another thing. I think that the way F. Murray Abraham is playing Khonshu is in itself a tip-off that it's not real. Because he's not speaking like, I guess, an Egyptian god would speak.
Hey, listen, it's been a long time since the ages of ancient Egypt.
I know. I could
maybe
be
he's
wrong.
got to talk in a way to which Mark would hear him.
I know.
So
I know.
I don't know. We'll see. Okay, next up. What do you got? We got Bamaham Yum, who writes, imagine being an MCU civilian. Somebody else brought this up earlier. Civilian and seeing Arishem appear in the sky, then sky splitting open in Spider-Man No Way Home, and then a total eclipse midday, and then the spinning of stars in the sky, alien invasions, Thanos snapping people away. It is not fun. Listen, somebody once asked me, I remember during a show, Rob, somebody wrote in and asked, hey, if you could live in any fantastical world, the world of the MCU, the world of Star Wars, what is it? I was like, I'll tell you where I wouldn't live. MCU. Because your survival chances are slim. Like slim. I'd rather just live in the Shire and take my chances there.
Yeah. Where nothing happens.
Or some other planet in the far reaches of space in Star Wars where everything's just peaceful. Everybody just hangs out. It's not fun to be there. All right. Bren 10,000 writes. Yeah, that was right. F. Murray Abrams' voiceover performance is amazing. It adds a sense of depth to a completely CG character similar to Josh Brolin as Thanos, except he doesn't have the advantage of even being able to do any facial expressions.
Right.
He's got to be able to do all that inflection has to all be in his voice, period. And I think that's pretty great. I mean, I understand the objections you have. Like, this is an Egyptian god. He doesn't sound like an Egyptian god to me. I get that. But to me, it totally there's a power in his voice, but there's personality in his voice. That's what this episode gave me. There's personality in his voice too. So, and also Mark isn't the only one who's a little mentally unwell. The trial scene also suggested to me that Khonshu's a little unbalanced.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
They're all unbalanced.
They're all unbalanced. I kind of dig that a bit, to be honest with you. All right. New Day writes in again and sends in like another $50 super chat. Thank you, New Day, again for supporting our channel on that level, man. New Day writes, for instance, at Senfu's wait a second, that was part 2, was it? Yes, this was part 2 of New Day. Already got this one. Okay, sorry about that. But thank you again, New Day, anyway. All right, Aiden Foley writes, I swear this show just keeps getting better and better with every episode. Here's my guess. I believe that Mark's unknown personality killed Layla's father. You know what? That's so bloody obvious. I didn't even consider before until right now.
They said that he was Oscar Isaac. Mark was denying that. What did he mean? Layla's like, what did he mean by that?
No, he didn't deny that he killed his father. He denied that he's got a secret that will make her see you the way you see yourself.
Well, yes.
I never put. I'm going to admit it right now. I never put those pieces of the puzzle together.
That's absolutely obvious. What happened. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Crap. Shit. That's going to really F things up.
Yeah, but it's already been done.
I know, but
and maybe that's what's caused this schism to occur.
Shit. Okay. Does it become a forgivable offense if she ultimately realizes it wasn't Mark's personality that did it?
But again, I don't know. What I find so interesting
is, did Mark do it and Mark knows it?
I don't. You have to ask yourself this question: the way this was set up, we go in the way they are telling the story, John. We meet a guy who's clearly schizophrenic, dissociative identity disorder. He works in a museum, and then he's this other guy we don't know anything about. This other guy who turns out to be Mark, who talks to him in mirrors. That's it. And then we're following this down the road, and there's action scenes. Now there's Egyptian gods, and I'm married, and you might have killed my father. There's all this stuff, and none of us, we're not asking ourselves, like, wait a minute. This just happened? It wasn't like Stephen and Mark were born into being possessed by Khonshu. When did all of this occur? We're already seeing it after the fact. There's been no illusion at all. You've got a guy walking, before Khonshu possessed you, I was his avatar. Well, how did that happen? When did that happen? Where did that happen? Where were you when Khonshu took over? There's been nothing like that. There's been no illusions. But it hasn't been necessary yet.
No,
but don't you think there's a lot of information there that we'd want to go?
We're only halfway through the series.
I know. Like, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot.
There's a lot to come. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still too fucking distracted by this. That Mark or a part of Mark killed Layla's father. I've been waiting for them to fix things. Damn it! This is going to complicate shit.
Oh yeah.
I'm really bothered by this.
It's all part of it.
Crap. Okay, let's keep going here. That was from Aiden. Yes, and I agree that to me the show gets better and better. Elif writes, I noticed watching the credits for this episode that Oscar Isaac is an executive producer of the series. How much input do you think he has on this series? Look, we honestly don't know, but my guess is that this is one of those situations where, okay, I'll star in it. I want an executive producer credit. Okay. I honestly don't think he has much. To be honest with you, I'm not even quite sure how much input the directors have in the MCU. I mean, obviously they get a good amount of, but less than any other directors anywhere. MCU directors get less input than any other directors anywhere.
Right.
And unless you're Kevin Feige, I don't know, or the director, I don't know how much input anybody has. So I'm going to actually go on a limb and say, I think this is, tell me if you agree with me. I think this is a executive producer in name only kind of situation.
No, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to guess probably very, very little input.
Yeah.
That's a guess. We don't know if that's a fact or not, but that's our guess. All right. Leo Liang writes, our boy Steven with a V shoveled that star map puzzle or solved that star map puzzle like it was a Fisher Price toy. Oh yeah, it was no problem for him. But I have no problem with that because it's already established that Steven is an expert in this shit. He knows it. This is what he spends his life researching. It's what's fascinating him. So he researches this. So for him to come across that problem, look, imagine this. You're somebody who totally loves Minecraft. I've never played Minecraft, but whatever. You're somebody your whole life, you have been obsessed with Minecraft. And then you're on a globe-trotting adventure where somehow, some way, you come across a puzzle that can only be solved with Minecraft knowledge. You're going to blow through that problem, no problem at all. You're going to blow through that puzzle, no problem at all, because you know Minecraft. So to me, that wasn't a problem that he was able to solve it so simply, because this is what he does. All right. Thanks for that in, Leo. Movies Matter writes, every time I think I can't possibly be more impressed by Oscar's performance and the nuances he brings to each personality, I am proven wrong. Wow. Telling you what, some people said this after episode 1, and I was like, hold your horses, hold your horses. But I am not just, fanboying in the moment. Everything that's a comic book thing should be Best Picture. No. 3 episodes in, I am ready to say, I think there's going to be an argument to be made for Oscar Isaac legitimately for Emmy consideration here.
I agree.
I really believe that.
I agree.
Like,
he's fantastic.
Do you think he's elevated enough at this point?
Yeah. I mean, he's been doing incredible work here.
All right. Now, of course, that's going to have to be now compared to other performers and performances they give. But we'll see how that goes. All right. Thanks a lot for that, Movies Matter. Chronophobia, a fear of time, writes, with all the cosmology being introduced, I wonder if we'll see Eternity and the Living Tribunal at the end of Moon Knight as a post-credit, or more likely in Multiverse of Madness. You know, it's funny, we were discussing the Living Tribunal just a little bit today. Now, what was the other name there? Eternity was not brought up today, but we discussed Living Tribunal. I certainly don't think so in Moon Knight.
No.
Let me ask you, as somebody who's more attuned to the comics, was Living Tribunal ever really a part of the Moon Knight comics?
I don't think so. I can't remember
so either,
that he was. I mean, the Egyptian gods were. I don't think Living Tribunal was. But again, I'm thinking that 42 years of Moon Knight I've been reading.
Whew.
I mean, and there's not a really definitive Moon Knight run. There's various things that happen, but there's no like storyline that people point to. Maybe some of the more recent ones like the Lemire run or the Bendis run, but even them, there's no like Craven's Last Hunt or.
Right. All right. Thanks a lot for running that in, Chronophobia. Next up, Chase Olivas writes, I love this show. My theory for episode 4 is Mark and Steven will be in Khonshu's mind. And I feel that the direction of the show makes me feel like they're going to bring an in-outside help. Thoughts? Thanks. I don't know what you mean by saying Mark and Steven will be in Khonshu's mind. I don't know what he means by that. But going on to the idea that they bring in outside help. There's a pro and a con argument to be made for it. The con argument is simple. There has been nothing in this show so far to remotely suggest a connection to an outside character coming in. Like, at all. Nothing. This has been aside from a brief reference, There's been no ties between the larger MCU and this show. This has very much been Moon Knight show and the immediate Moon Knight characters. So on that level, that's a big argument against some outside help coming in.
Right.
The argument for that, though, is a very big deal has been made out of the fact that nobody has seen episodes 5 and 6. And that there is possibly some significant developments, maybe not surprises, maybe surprises, but at least significant developments happening. That could possibly suggest or hint that there could be a significant outside presence that comes in. Maybe even that gets a quick reference in episode 4. Rob, at this point, what do you think the odds are that between now and the end of the season that we'll see another significant MCU character enter the fray?
I think we might. Now, I don't know who that is, but I think we might have somebody. Because wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be cool if? I don't know who that would be.
Depending on who it would be, though.
I mean,
who would be a good fit? Let's play with this for a second. Who would be a good fit? Because obviously, not War Machine. War Machine's not a
no,
fit.
I don't know. I mean, somebody said there was a rumor at some point. I read something about Bruce Banner being here somehow, but I don't see
way outside of his field.
None of the people that we've met really fit with this.
Okay, what about she's not Egyptian? Ms. Marvel? That's a stretch.
Maybe, but she hasn't been
stretch.
Introduced yet.
No, but Black Panther wasn't introduced before the Black Panther
could
movie.
be. I mean, maybe, but I don't see that happening.
Some people are saying Blade. We haven't been all we've done so far is heard Blade's voice.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, maybe Blade would know something that we don't know.
Blade and Black Knight could show up because the two of them are together at the end of Eternals.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, is the museum that Mark works at the same museum from Eternal?
I asked that question myself before. I can't remember if that museum.
I mean, I know
the same one that
it's not the actual build. I mean, it's not the same building. It's a different.
Was it? Okay, I never really paid attention.
But they've never really addressed it. And I'll tell you something. If this is all, if we don't have all the facts, and I tend to think we still don't. Who knows? Maybe he does. I don't know. Maybe we could see an Eternal because it makes sense that an Eternal would show up. What if Gemma Chan shows up?
Yeah, and Yamil is pointing out in the live chat, I mean, hey, Black Knight did work in a museum.
So did Cersei.
And Blade showed up. So who knows? Maybe that could be it. This is as good a theory as any. All right, thanks for writing that in, Chase. Joshua Rivera writes, let's see. Hello, John and crew. Did Khonshu bring the MCU 2,000 years back in time? Well, no. He just, he just altered the night sky, I think temporarily, to what it would have looked like 2,000 years ago. But you look at the city they're in, the cars are still there, everybody's still dressed. He didn't time travel the world. He altered the light in the sky. And Rob's theory here, I think, is a pretty good one, that might have even just been limited to within a certain radius that people would have even noticed that. So I'm sure we'll get more definitive answers, though, once we get into episode 4. But no, I don't think he time traveled the world. All right, Alex Holt writes, what if Gore shows up whilst Khonshu is entrapped and kills the other gods apart from Hera and Khonshu? Over under, what percentage does that happen? Listen, we've talked about this on the John Campea Show. Gore is coming. Gore, the God Butcher, is coming. We've been introduced to a bunch of gods here in Egypt. It's possible. The one big argument against it, though, is that does Gore actually get to Earth before Thor 4 even happens?
I don't know.
And that makes it touchy. But thematically, it would fit, right, Rob? I mean, wouldn't it?
Could. I just don't think they're going to introduce Christian Bale in a TV show right now.
Yeah.
Although it is Oscar Isaac, but I think that they've already got Ethan Hawke. They've already got the situation set up. And if Gore the God Butcher shows up in the last 2 episodes, it'd be like, wait, who is this? What does he have to do with all these characters?
Yeah, I agree. All right. But hey, definitely on the scale of possibilities. Calvin Patel writes, how deep does Marvel Comics go into the Egyptian mythology?
A lot. I mean, there's a lot of Egyptian mythology in Marvel Comics, and especially with Khonshu. I mean, Khonshu's been over the last 40 years, they've done all kinds of things with the Egyptian gods. And remember, even with the other characters that are outside of this, like Ramatep, Apocalypse, we saw ancient Egypt in the beginning of Bryan Singer's Apocalypse, the X-Men Apocalypse movie.
Yeah, that's true. All right, next up, we got Tim Platt who writes, what was the line that Chris said connected this with the rest of the MCU? I don't know which one she was referring to.
I know. She was referring to. I'm about Asgard. Wasn't there a quip about Asgard in this episode?
Was it Asgard?
I was think it was.
No, I was thinking it was Madripoor.
Well, yeah, they do say Madripoor.
Yeah.
They do say Madripoor.
Yeah, so that connects, obviously.
But I thought somebody said something about the gods and Asgard. Maybe
if they did, I don't remember.
Maybe, but yes, Madripoor. That they did say that.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, we've got. By the way, a bunch of people in the live chat are now firing in Madripoor. So maybe that's the specific one she was mentioning.
I thought somebody mentioned Asgard too.
Ab Hinav writes, "Wow." And he sends in like $20 super chat. Thank you for that. Writes in, wow, 3 shows back to back to back. I don't know about game day, but this is like the WrestleMania weekend best day ever. Yeah, I mean, we are now at, because we've been going for an hour right now. So that's 4.5. We've been live streaming 5.5 hours today. 5.5 hours today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do the show tomorrow. My throat is pretty much banged up right now. But yeah, we've had a lot of stuff today. All right. Thank you for that, man. We appreciate, you know what? It's been a lot of fun because we got to do the John Campea Show earlier today. Then we got to do an awesome movie club on an awesome movie of Captain America Civil War. And now we're talking about an awesome show in Moon Knight. So it's been a pretty fun day. Exhausting, but pretty fun. Thanks for writing that in, dude. All right. Next up, we got Aiden Foley who writes, I think I noticed a small logic flaw in this episode. When they were turning back the night sky to completely a different night, wouldn't that have reversed the rest of time to that night as well? No, not necessarily. It literally, I don't know that Khonshu literally moved the stars.
Right.
So much as he was rewinding what it would have looked like.
Yes.
Right? There's a difference between changing it and changing our perception to what it would have looked like that night 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
because remember, all we're seeing of the stars is starlight that's millions of years old. So he's not actually moving the stars. And if he did move the stars, we would never see it that way because the light from those stars that are moved would not get to us for another million years. So he basically just took the light that exists now and rearranged it.
That's a good, the whole point about even if you just moved the stars themselves, we wouldn't see the difference.
No.
It would take a long time for us to see the difference.
We would never see the difference ever.
All right, next up, we got Hero75 who writes, good to hear from you, Hero, writes in, my theory as to how to explain the Egyptian gods in the MCU is that they are from a different plane of reality, like Dormammu from Doctor Strange. Well, I mean, the idea was brought up on the John Campea Show earlier today that who's to say the Egyptian gods aren't likened unto Stargate and they're just from another planet.
Right. Well, they are from the Overrealm or whatever it's called.
Yeah, whatever it was called.
Yeah.
The Overvoid.
The Overvoid. That's where they're from.
So I mean, it could be explained. I mean, look, they could just straight up say they are gods as we understand gods. They could say they are gods as they became understood with Asgard and the Asgardians and stuff like that, and Odin and Thor. So yeah, it could be that completely. That could be part of the explanation. All right. CJ Rebirth writes, I was laughing on my bed watching this when Steven was stabbed a bunch of times, said, oh, okay, Mark, take over. You take over control. Dude, I love that because it still shows Mark or Steven is a guy. Look, he's clearly he has convictions. He would rather go to jail than to allow his body to be used to hurt other people.
Yep.
And it's great. I'll float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. I'm Steven with the V. Bah, bah, bah. Oh, a pole just got shoved through my liver. Yeah, okay, Mark, you take over. Like, I am hereby out of my depth.
Yes.
You need to save me. I did love that line, CJ. All right, next up. We got Chase writes in. Need this character on the big screen. Do you think we'll ever see him in an MCU movie? Rob, you've been preaching this sermon for a while, right?
I think he should be. I think if they, depending on where this winds up, Moon Knight should absolutely be on movie screens. You know, he's been a member of the Avengers. Why not?
It is going to be a little tricky, I think, for Marvel to launch him on the small screen and then to make a feature film.
It's going to be tough unless he's a part of a bigger ensemble.
Okay, so I was about to bring up Ms. Marvel, right? Because Ms. Marvel is going to be making her introduction on the small screen. then she is coming to the big screen in the Marvels, but that's an ensemble where she's going to be appearing with Captain Marvel, who has had, I mean, it's essentially a Captain Marvel sequel. So it's a little bit different. So maybe Moon Knight could appear in another film project.
Sure.
All right. Next up. Where are we at? We're at Shelby, who writes, I remember that night. I remember every night.
Yeah.
Again, I think the second half of this episode was the coolest we've seen of Khonshu.
Well, yeah, I mean, all that stuff was very cool. I mean, he looks cool. I mean, like you said.
But again, then his self-sacrifice, that whole thing, I remember that night. He even started treating Steven with a little bit of respect, right? Like, he didn't just say to him, I'm going to need help doing this, worm. Summon Mark back.
Right.
He started respecting Steven a little bit, and I kind of loved it.
If you look at what's going on, the character of Steven himself has developed, the persona of Steven has become stronger, was able to develop his Mr. Knight personality. So he's been healing at the same time as well. So that's why Khonshu is treating him differently.
All right.
That's because his therapy in the institution he's going to wake up in is,
Next up, we got Daryl Best Wadley, who writes, what if we're being thrown a curveball with Ethan Hawke and the main villain of the show is the other personality that's killing people?
Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, but no, what if it's Mark and Steven's third personality that when he blanked out?
I think it is Ethan Hawke.
That doesn't make a lot of sense, though.
But see, that personality is apart from them. You know, he in his own mind, he's created this other personality. Because even when they sit down, oh, can you hear him? Is that his voice right now? Like Ethan Hawke tells, yeah, I was his avatar. He's saying all of these things.
But he can't hear him anymore.
No, that's what he's saying. Because that personality broke himself free. If you see that Khonshu, both Steven and Mark can conjure their own versions of Moon Knight.
I'll tell you the main reason I don't buy it is because Arthur is physically in another place.
Is he?
Not.
I mean, it's just look at Fight Club. Look at Fight Club. You see Tyler Durden and you see I Am Jack's, the narrator.
But you don't see them physically in two separate physical locations doing something and interacting with other people at the same time.
Right, because those personalities haven't manifested themselves.
But that's what's going on here, because Arthur is at the Amit dig site.
Right.
Mark is on this roof with these other people.
The way they've shown it to us.
I just think at this point, they've dove so far into this.
I don't know. I mean, I think maybe it's Occam's razor, and exactly what we're seeing is exactly what's happening.
Because I think at this point, if they were to say it was a Tyler Durden situation, I would find that to be a big FU to the viewers. Like,
Depending
because they've
they
just been feeding us all this stuff. I mean, you're right. Depending on how they did it, listen, I've learned to give Kevin Feige the benefit of the doubt. So let's see where they go with it. All right. Next up, Marie Seifring writes, with Khonshu turned to stone, Mark and Layla have to fight the supernatural without special protection. Interesting. Again, though, if we look at this in the terms of how the avatars work, right now, Amit is able to function with a part of Amit's power in him, or at least in he's able to wield a bunch of Amit's power without Amit being there. I believe, and we'll find out quickly in episode 4, I believe that there is a part of Khonshu's power is actually in Mark. And Mark is going to be able to summon the suit, even though he doesn't realize it yet, without Khonshu there. We've seen this play out in other movies before where, I only have this power when I have this. And then the hero doesn't have that anymore. And then they realize they still have the power anyway. I think that's what's going to play out. And I think that's going to be the next step in the evolution of the character. Do you agree with that? Or
I
what
think
do you think?
Something like that can be happening. So I got to tell you, to be honest, I feel a little lost because I usually can tell where things are going. And I kind of like the fact that I can't.
Yeah, we're a little bit in the dark here. We're a little bit in the dark. All right. Let's see. Next up, we have, where are we? NC writes, I prefer the mystical, fantastical, cosmic versus street level rooted in reality. For me, it went a bit too fast. I think we need this to be 2 episodes. Are we, do you feel like what happened in this? Well, I mean, because NC makes a point. We went from this terrific street fight even this one episode, a fight on the roof with knives and trying to whatever, to the constellations being moved in the sky and stuff like that. See, I don't know. I love the fact that it's a blending of both. I don't know if I feel like it has to be one or the other, but I don't know. What do you think
Part
about
of that is exactly why I think what we're seeing is it's an unreliable narrator situation. You know, but I think that you're right. I mean, that street fight on the rooftops and the streets, that's very grounded. And there's all these other people around. And then we kind of go into this dreamland, like, yes, we're practicing to be knights at medieval nights, like you said. Like, it's all very strange. I mean, if you think about the transitions, like suddenly we're in Egypt. Then think about the transition from the second episode to the third episode. You open the window, you're on the balcony in Egypt, and then suddenly you're on a street fighting these thugs and you're in a knife fight. Well, where's the interim space? Who are those people? When did you start talking to them?
Let me bring you something that I noticed, and I don't know if there's been any explanation for it, okay? I can't tell if you can see this picture I have on my screen here of Mr. Knight. Can you see that here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, this is how we've seen him. The white eyes, all that kind of stuff. Here's an official poster for Moon Knight that came out a few months ago. Not the white eyes. Actual human eyes behind the mask. I've never really thought of it before, but could this poster be some kind of a representation? Because it certainly he looks like a darker individual. Like with the way the eyes are, that doesn't look like Steven. Could this actually have been our right in front of our faces, that this is the third personality?
I mean, it could be.
Because I'll take it. Let me bring up these images again. This dude looks way different than that dude.
Yep.
Of
course, that's probably a live gallery photograph, and the other one has visual effects
But this has got the Moon Knight titling on it, the whole bit. This was an officially released poster.
I know.
So I don't know. I just wonder if there could be something there to that. I don't know. We'll find out. All right. Let's see here. Chronophobia writes, also, I feel more positive that Harrow is Mark's therapist. It seems like Jake Lockley's coming soon as Mark's other persona. I mean, that if Chronophobia is right about that, and I don't buy into this myself, but if it is, it does feed into your theory about a lot of this just being in his head and the unreliable narrator. What do you think about him actually being his...
I don't know if it's going to be Jake Lockley, because Jake Lockley, the persona, isn't fun.
Well, I mean, they could do him differently.
But I know, look, we saw Duchamp's name on the phone, which is Frenchie, his very good friend. So that's why I keep thinking there's more to this than meets the eye.
All right. And then, guys, we just had a couple people send in Super Chat badges just to be supportive. Cast Graphics and S-Beam send in Super Chat badges to be supportive. Thank you guys for that.
Both good men. I know both of them.
Both good men. Thank you for supporting us. And, guys, that'll do it for this installment of the Moon Knight After Show, or open spoiler discussion. Thank you guys for being here and being a part of this. I am not going to lie to you. I love this show, guys. I am so freaking excited. I'm like, why? When is next Tuesday night? It's so far away. I'm so stoked about it. Although I do get to watch a new episode of Halo tonight. I'm telling you what, I'm really getting into Halo.
Is this episode 5?
4. I finally got caught up on episode 3. I really liked episode 3.
I think the end of Ozark starts this week too.
Oh, there you go. I haven't been watching Ozark, so I'm unplugged on that. But I think I'm going to get to watch a new episode of Halo tonight. It's been some good damn stuff, dude. Anyway, guys, thanks for being here and joining us for this discussion of Moon Knight. I want to thank, of course, Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, where can people follow you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Robert RM Burnett. You can find me on Twitter at Burnett RM. Find me on my YouTube channel, The Post Geek Singularity, or go to postgeeksingularity.com.
And you guys can, of course, follow me on Instagram or on Twitter, simply at John Campea. All right, guys, that does it for a very long day of broadcasting for us. We will be back, of course, again tomorrow for the next episode of the John Campea Show. Guys, make sure you click like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you come back and join us again tomorrow. That'll do it for us, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. And until next time, Conchu.